Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Licensing Subcommittee meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Councillor Fiona Smith and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. If I lose connection and can't reconnect, Councillor David Morton will take over for me. I'd like to remind all participants of a few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. When prompted, you may indicate you wish to speak, but please wait till I call on you before speaking fully. I also ask that members keep their questions and comments brief and to the point. If any councillor leaves the meeting or loses connection during an item, we'll pause and wait a few minutes for them to reconnect. If a councillor isn't present for a substantial part of the discussion of an item, they won't be included in the deliberations. Quorum for this meeting is 2 members of the committee, and if we have fewer than 2 members in attendance, I'll have to adjourn the meeting. The committee also received a supplementary agenda on the 7th of May 2021, which contained additional information from the applicant, and the further agenda was published yesterday on the 17th of May 2021, which included some redactions. I'll now move on to item 1 on the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received no apologies today. Item 2 is roll call and declaration of interests. I'll now do a roll call to confirm the members in attendance. When called upon, please say present and note any declarations of interest. Councillor Morton.
Present. Yeah, and I do represent a ward that neighbours onto the site.
Okay, noted. And Councillor Stainton.
Present and no conflict of interest.
Lovely, thank you. Item 3, Premier Inn, West London Magistrates Court, 181 Telgarth Road in London. I'd like to ask everyone participating to introduce yourself as I call on you. So we should have with us the applicant's licensing solicitor.
Yes, good evening. My name is Tim Shield from John Gaunton Partners. I'm the solicitor that lodged the application on behalf of Whitbread Group plc, and I have with me Neil Hislop, who deals with the development and opening, and I see that Jonathan Langdon, who is also from Whitbread Group plc, is also here as well. I will submit the application when it comes to my turn, and then any questions can be dealt with either by myself, Mr. Hislop, or Mr. Langdon as appropriate.
Noted. Thank you. And we have Council's licensing officer.
Maria Dimitriou, present chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina, licensing enforcement officer.
Thank you. And the Council's legal officer.
Isgerta Godela, present chair.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, are you with us? Okay,
please, Chair, no.
Okay, we're expecting Councillor Murphy hopefully at some point. He has submitted an objection, so if we don't hear from him, I will summarise that at the appropriate moment. We have the chair of the Save Our Hammersmith Action Forum.
Rudolf van Hasselt, hello. I chair the Save Our Hammersmith Action Forum and I'm a local resident.
And some more residents. I have Ruth Savoury.
I speak as a local resident. Good evening.
Thank you. And Lisa Shepherd.
I'm here under Lisa Renievich Shepherd. I'm a local resident and also part of Save Our Hammersmith.
Okay. And Thierry Tantot.
Thierry Tantot, present, part of the Save Our Hammersmith, and I'm a local resident in St Dunstan's Road.
Thanks. And Abel Haddon. Do we have the chair of the Margaret Bean Gardens?
I apologise for my slowness in unmuting myself. I am chairman, as you say, of the Margaret Bean Gardens and St Dunstan Road Residents Association, representing about 200 households immediately abutting this development. and I'm also a member of Save Our Hammersmith and a local resident. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And Diana Rhodes.
Hello, present Chair. I am here in my capacity as a private resident on Biscay Road, which is about 60 meters from the site. I'm also on the committee for Save Our Hammersmith, but I am here in my private capacity. Thank you.
Okay, lovely stuff. Thank you all. Thanks for your patience. A few quick notes on procedure before we consider the application today. I'll just quickly explain what the committee will follow. So we'll hear from the following. The licensing officer will introduce the application. We'll then hear Councillor PJ Murphy's objection comments. The residents which have made written representations in objection, I'll call on you in turn, and then the applicant will have their chance to speak at the end. Usually each party will address the committee once for a maximum of 5 minutes. We've got lots of comments, so please be as brief as possible. Following the presentation by all parties, the committee may ask questions of any party or other person present at the hearing. No party has the right to ask questions of any other party at any time during the hearing. To be clear, you can't ask questions of each other. The questions will come from the committee, and hopefully from that we'll be able to draw everything that we need to know. Following the presentation and questioning, each party will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to sum up their case or representation. Committee will then retire for deliberations, and upon its return, I'll announce the committee's decision. So can I please ask the licensing officer to introduce the application?
Thank you, Chair. On the 24th of February, Whitbread Group plc submitted an application for a premises license to be granted in respect of the premises known as Premier Inn, West London Magistrates Court, 181 Dalgarth Road. The applicant has applied for a new premises license for the exhibition of films, the provision of late night refreshment, as well as the sale of alcohol both on and off the premises. Please note that with regards to the late night refreshments, section I on the application form, which is page 18 of the agenda, states provision of hot food and drinks for consumption on and off the premises. However, the applicant has selected the indoors option, which means that they can only sell for consumption on the premises. On the 24th of March, following correspondence received from the police, the applicant agreed to add an extra condition to the premises license if granted. A copy of this amendment and relevant correspondence can be seen on pages 34 to 36 of the report. The licensing section received 39 representations in total, one from Councillor Murphy, one from the chair of the Margravine Gardens and St. Dunstan's Road Residents Association, one from the chair of the Save Our Hammersmith Action Forum, as well as 36 from local residents, all objecting to the license application. Following the objections received, an additional letter with clarification has been submitted by the applicant. Additionally, in response to that letter, a number of further comments have been received. All these can be seen on pages 70 to 73 of the report. On the 21st of April, additional evidence was submitted by the applicant's licensing solicitor. I can confirm that this has been circulated to all interested parties. Additionally, it has been confirmed by Mr. Seal that the premises is a new build site and it is estimated to open in around 2 years. Mr. Seal has also confirmed that they have full planning permission in place granted by the council. Finally, I would like to add that that licensing has requested details, including names and addresses of all the residents that are represented by both Mr. Hayden and Mr. Van Hasselt, but these have not been provided to date. Nothing further from licensing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would now be hearing from Councillor Murphy. Doesn't appear to have arrived. He may well join us later, but I can just
sorry, Chair, he has joined.
I am here. I was on mute and on.
You can be yourself if you like.
Thank you very much. That's quite a scary thought. Well, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and also thank you to the residents. I think this is probably one of the most objected to licenses that certainly I've experienced. And I think that needs to be seen in the context of where this building is and the overall impact that this license will have. I think it's also worth noting that this isn't about people objecting to the license. None of them are objecting to the hotel. They're not being, that wonderful phrase, NIMBYs. They just simply want to be able to have a good night's sleep, to reduce noise, to reduce the impact on them, and in essence, to be able to have a slightly reduced opening time. There are 5 kind of areas that we can object on, or 4 areas, sorry, that we can object on, which is public nuisance, the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, and last, probably the most important, the protection of children from harm. Okay. My objections mainly cover the first 2 of this, of public nuisance and prevention of crime and disorder. But I think also we need to look at the protection of children from harm in the wider context, that we know that late night noise and continual sleep interruption or deprivation can do long-term damage to the emotional and mental health of young people. And we need to see the noise that this will create by the late licensing within that context. It's a shame really that the hotel operators haven't taken these requests on board and are simply really riding roughshod over residents' concerns, particularly over the public nuisance and prevention of crime and disorder. I do also have to express a concern about the way this license application has been filed or filled, and the demonstrable lack of knowledge that this demonstrates for me, for the residents, sorry, and really for the hotel industry overall. Why the applicants originally requested permission to show films all day to non-residents is beyond me. And yet, as is their belief that this was needed for in-room films when it wasn't. I don't want to dwell on this, but it kind of does show to me a kind of a lackadaisical approach, which speaks to the ability to run an establishment in a very tightly bound in and highly residential community. This hotel's in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. And more than that, it's the only bar or pub in the immediate vicinity. So by definition, it's going to act as a draw for people to come into the neighborhood with all the attendant issues this can create. The application is for on and off sales until midnight. And this is, unacceptable. As it's inevitable that people will leave the bar after an enjoyable night's drinking and make a noise on the way out and create a disturbance in what's otherwise a quiet residential neighborhood. It's also inevitable that some who leave will be very drunk. We see it all the time. And this will create an additional disturbance and potentially lead to more crime in the area. My request, and I think the residents' request, is very simple. Instead of closing at midnight, close at 10:30 during the week and 11 o'clock at the weekend. This will allow the residents or people who go to the pub to have an enjoyable evening as opposed to a late night drinking session, and allow the residents an undisturbed night's sleep. I have to really strongly object to off sales being permitted at all, even in closed containers. Closed containers, did make me smile, because anyone with any life experience knows full well that opening a bottle of beer, wine or spirit, or taking the top off a plastic beer glass is commonplace. And it's inevitable that people leaving will find a local spot to perch, crack open their drinks and carry on their carousing. It's just the way that things are. And we have to again see this in the context of the build. There's a very large outside terrace just outside the hotel, and the proposed student accommodation being built by the same developers almost next door. Given that, there'll be about 700 rooms in the student accommodation, and the hotel with an excess of 400. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out where people sit and drink late into the evening on a summer's evening. And that will be fueled by off sales. On a summer's night, the noise, disturbance, drunken behaviour could become really intolerable. there'll be a massive intrusion into the life and well-being of residents in what is a very quiet area. And of course, once established as a late night drinking point, the terrace would become a magnet for non-residents, for non-students to come and enjoy the outside and late night drinking fueled by off sales. This will have the effect really of enriching Whitbread at the expense of a poorer quality of life for the residents. The requests we make are really very simple and won't have a detrimental impact really on Whitbread. There's 3 requests. 1, the bar closes at 10:30 during the week. It's 11 o'clock at the weekend, like other areas, and no off sales, closed or open, are permitted. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Murphy. We have some comments from our local residents. If I'd like to invite the chair of Save Our Hammersmith Action Forum, just to remind you, you've got 5 minutes, and if you'd like to give your comments now.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for allowing me to speak briefly. In addition to the objections that are submitted and which are published in the agenda, as said, I chair the Save Our Hammersmith Action Forum, which represents local communities and a large number of residents all around the new hotel site. Residents have asked us to object to the licensing application on the grounds of prevention of public nuisance, prevention of public disorder, and ensuring public safety. Whilst we all want to see a successful business occupying the 181 Talgarth Road site, sorry, did I go on mute there? So residents have asked us to object to the licensing application on the grounds of public nuisance, public disorder, and public safety. And whilst we all want to see a successful business occupying the site, the proposal causes a number of significant problems. The site to which the application applies, as Councillor Murphy has already indicated, lies directly across the railway tracks from residential streets and particularly the Barons Court Conservation Area. Since part of the license application concerns allowing outside and off sales, this would be highly disturbing to local residents. The high number of occupants on the site from the 400-room hotel and also the 700 students, together with late night drinking application, will turn this site into a busy late night drinking and entertainment destination. I don't think that was how the planning application for the development of this site was conceived. The plans shown on the final page of the additional agenda suggest that there's a small area in the courtyard for outside drinking, just on the margin of the building. Since there's nothing to stop drinkers moving outside this narrow margin, it would likely attract drinkers to congregate outside, which in turn would cause much increase and disturbing level of noise, reverberating off the buildings. Hence, we request that the opening hours are reduced to indoor sales 10:30 weekdays, 11 o'clock weekends, and full closure no later than 11 o'clock. And we request that the outside service and congregation shall stop at 10 o'clock at the latest. And we request that the off sales shall not be permitted at all. There also appear to be a number of conflicts in terms of the use of the site. I'm a frequent user myself of Premier Inn hotels and understand one of its key markets are professional and tradespeople, who we imagine will not be pleased to find a drinking destination within their hotel, disturbing their stay and sleep, despite the Premier Inn promise of a good night guarantee. It conflicts with the core hotel function. The developers for the site also now propose student accommodation, and it would seem to us a contradiction to allow late night drinking on the same site. Either this facility would become the student bar for 700 students, or it would cause disturbance for those who either need a quiet rest or time to study in their rooms. Finally, the site can only be accessed along the busy Talgarth Road. It's dangerous and a safety risk for late night revelers to be leaving late at night along such a busy road with, certainly at night, fast traffic. So for the reasons of preventing public nuisance, preventing public disorder, and ensuring public safety, our plea is for you to reject or at least significantly restrict a license for what threatens otherwise to become the go-to drinking destination, and to ensure that the use of the site remains as intended, a hotel. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to hear from Ruth Savory.
My main objection is regarding public nuisance as a local resident. When you buy or rent a property near a pub, you know what you're taking on. This is a new hotel and it's going to be very close to us, and we all know that noise travels. There seems to be no good reason for off sales. And for last drinks, it seems reasonable to say 11 o'clock, though earlier would be much better, as Councillor Murphy said, as things take a while to wind down. Drinks should be taken inside by 10 p.m. to keep the noise down. And that's, as already said, for the residents actually on the site, but for those of us who live nearby every single day of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Lisa Shepherd.
Lisa Shepherd's chosen not to speak, Chair.
Okay, apologies. Thierry Tento, would you like to speak?
I don't think I've got any further comment to add to what's been already kind of lengthily detailed. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, thank you. And Abel Haddon, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the 150 or so households, 200 people who are resident in Margravine Gardens and St Dunstan's Road, which, as I said in my earlier introduction, immediately abuts the proposed site, because we're talking about a building site at the moment, the proposed site of this hotel and the bar. And I completely agree with all of the speakers who've already spoken. It is that concern about noise travelling, particularly at night. Many of the households that are nearest to this proposed development have young children. And the thought of the noise of people, whether from off sales, which I see have been withdrawn, and that's a step in the right direction, but late at night, these hours, and the concern of revellers. The council is considering a change of use for the North building, again, a proposal, that this should become student accommodation with a capacity of 675 rooms and students in there. I think we all remember our student days and how when we've worked hard over an essay, we like to go and let off a bit of steam, and alcohol always helps letting off steam. And if there is the opportunity on their doorstep to go and buy alcohol and have a good time, I'm afraid I cannot see any way in which this is going to contain local noise and the public disturbance of residents who live just across the tracks. So it is the combination for the residents that are concerned is that there should be nearly 700 students having late night drinking opportunity presented for them. Who wouldn't go and enjoy that and make noise? And so the main concern is that of noise. And I really can't see that these minor alterations for residents who've lived here for, in some instances, in the houses nearest, 40 years, without somebody referred to a pub, the equivalent of a pub, a bar being there. Absolutely fine if it had already been there and they'd moved in. But this is the other way around. We were the residents here first, and now this is being foisted upon us. So on behalf of the nearest households and all of the households in what somebody else mentioned is a conservation area. Please, please consider our local concerns when reaching your decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diana Rhodes, do you wish to speak?
Hi, yes. So I'm speaking as a local resident. I've had a house for 20 years on Biscay Road. On the planning application, I am noted as one of the closest houses to the development because Biscay Road faces Yeldham Road, which is on the tracks. I am about 60 meters directly as the crow flies across the tracks from the edge of the site. And I can also mention that all the houses on Yeldham Road that I face across, they're only about 20 meters from the south building of the Premier Inn. Literally 20 meters is how close it is. So what I would like to say is that the site is very deceptive. If you just look at it on a map, you might think it's part of the business part of Hammersmith. It's not. It's right on top of a very residential area. 20 meters away is closer than some streets are to each other. What I'd like to do is object to this on basis of public nuisance and public disorder. Public nuisance is mainly about noise. And I'd like to talk for a second about noise, because all of our houses are very close to the tracks on Biscay Road, Yeldham Road, and the back of Margravine Gardens. Noise travels in a very, very strange way around the tracks. And we have seen this because quite recently, there was Lambda, the student building Lambda, was put up a new building on the other side of the tracks, very close to where this hotel development will be. No one said the noise would be reflecting, the noise from the tracks would reflect off Lambda. And in fact, it has. It reflects off Lambda, hits the buildings on the other side of Margravine Gardens, and bounces back into my house on Biscay Road. So it's just an example of how strangely noise carries in the area. What the residents on Yeldham Road also find, because I've sat in the gardens at the back of the houses in Yeldham Road, is that again, the noise from the trains as they go by reflect off the buildings like the Arc and just the retaining wall for the tracks, and literally reflect back off the back of the houses on Biscay Road and into the back of their houses and their gardens. So I just wanted to demonstrate that noise is very strange, the way it carries around the tracks. We are all absolutely convinced with these brand new buildings going up, you're going to have buildings going up around a square. The terrace is going to be literally around that, in the middle of that square. So what's going to happen is the noise from people drinking and smoking and talking outside on the terrace will reflect, hit all the surrounding buildings and reflect across to us. So that is why we are all so incredibly concerned. And as Ruth Savory said, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, as a lot of the residents, we didn't buy this house to be next to not just a little pub with a little outside garden, but think of how many pubs you've been to that are open to 400 hotel residents and potentially, if the application is accepted, 700 students. It's a huge terrace next to the Premier Inn terrace, a huge one, and that's a public terrace. So the amount of noise, I think that everyone can understand why we're saying that we do not want, as residents, anyone outside on the Premier Inn terrace after 10 p.m. at night, because I think every resident in the area deserves a good night's sleep. The other point I would like to make is that I'm not just worried about a night's sleep, which we are all deeply worried about, obviously, but I would like to further note, because I have read the notes for licensing, I would like to be absolutely sure that no music is allowed outside on the terrace. There are no speakers on the terrace, and there is no acoustic music allowed outside on the terrace. I would also like to note that I would like to know what extra measures will be taken to soundproof the terrace full stop, because of the way the noise will reflect and bounce off the buildings. Because frankly, that terrace will be open from, I believe, and please do correct me, it might be 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the morning opening hours, but it will be open early in the morning, and it will go all the way through to, let's say, 10 o'clock at night. Now, if you're living in this house, we have a lot of both families with children and elderly residents who are at home a great deal. So we're going to hear a wall of noise for how many hours a day? So I'd like to note that when you look at the drawing, which has been pointed out is at the end of the application. If you look at the drawing, there's a big marking in red. There's a red drawing across it showing where the Premier Inn terrace actually is. Now, that wasn't clear from the planning application. So, oh, I see. Sorry, I'm going over time. Right. So yeah, it wasn't clear from the planning application. That is a new line in red, and it is quite clear there is a very clear terrace there. So that's why I'm asking about soundproofing. Thank you. Apologies, Chair.
That's okay. Thank you. It's very helpful. Thanks a lot. Okay, moving on. I'd now like the applicant to address the comments which have been made. Obviously, we've heard a lot from the residents, so I will be lenient with the time. But if you can be as concise as possible, that would be appreciated. But I understand you might have a lot to address as well.
I'm grateful for that indication, Chair. I will seek to be as brief and stay within the 5 minutes, but I do appreciate a number of matters have been raised. I've been scribbling some notes. Just by way of background, I will mention, and we do rely on the fact we are a Premier Inn of 800 premises around the country, and I would hope that most, if not all of you, know exactly what a Premier Inn is, what a Premier Inn does, and that it has a food and beverage offer. And I preface all my comments by saying we are good neighbours to all of our neighbours in all our other sites, and we have no issues with neighbourhood problems, have never faced enforcement action around that. I appreciate we're talking about a very specific application, but I do rely on who we are, what we are, and our background. You have with you a number of documents. I'm not going to read through the written submission. I will merely say I stand by that, and if there are queries arising out of that, then I will address those. In relation to the additional conditions that have been offered, they have been offered arising out of the representations, and a couple of points were raised early on, if I can say, around the cinema. Premier Inn have never operated cinemas, and we describe ourselves as a Premier Inn, and we will do what we do as a Premier Inn, which is hotel, restaurant, bar area. So when we heard the comments about the cinema, we moved to do a letter as soon as we heard about that at the end of March to clarify we have no interest in being a cinema. That's not what we're talking about. So I think that's very important. It has never been raised with me across the many years I've acted for Whitbread that we are a cinema or would ever be so. I deal really with the different types of representation, and the documents I'll refer to are page 37 of the main bundle, and you don't have to look now, I'll just refer to them, and that is the map produced by the licensing authority, which highlights the plan with the red radius blob, if I can call it that. I don't produce that, but 2 points I'd make on that. There are 2 blue dots nearby, one of them immediately adjacent to the right-hand side, and that is a BP Connect service station with a 24-hour off license facility. So there is a facility there for off sales already that goes way beyond what we are seeking. And frankly, on price point, we would not commit. So we're not aiming at being an off license in any traditional sense. I'll perhaps come back to that. And then over the road, over Talgarth Road, you can see another blue dot. That's a Novotel hotel, unrestricted with a 2 AM license. So we are not pushing back the boundaries in relation to this, except there are not lots of pubs and bars around, but it is important. The other document I would refer to is the plan, and I think it's very useful to do that, and that's my red edge one, which was submitted on page 23, of the bundle of documents. And this does go to address some of the points, I hope. By preface, we are only dealing here with our site, which is edged red, which you can see, and then continues down in an L shape towards the railway. We're not dealing with the other hotel, which is currently approved, which I understand is subject to a planning application for student accommodation. I'm not going to touch on that other than to say that is not our area. Yes, we have a responsibility to look after our customers and ensure we don't cause a nuisance, but that has not been decided as student accommodation or otherwise. The point I would make in relation to that, and Mr. Hislop can perhaps expand upon this if required, is if you look in the bundle of documents, we've included a menu as an indication as to what offer we do make elsewhere and what we will do here. I've also included pictures of the reception, which I think is very important, and you can see that on the plan because that shows access to the building. It's supervised 24 hours a day. After 11 o'clock at night, the reception is locked, so you can only gain entry by key card. In addition to that, it's a brand new building. It will have sound attenuation as part of the planning process. I don't know about the detail on the planning process, but it is a brand new building. Very important. If you look at the licensed area, and I submitted this to show the area we're seeking to license for sale of alcohol, to show you that there is no point of access which abuts onto the railway or outside of the interior area of the overall development. That's important. So there will be no public traffic down towards the railway or across the railway by customers whatsoever. Their only access and entrance point is out onto Talgarth Road, which is a busy thoroughfare, admittedly, but that is very different to saying it goes around the back. It's also very important to note on relation to the physical building, I call it the area to the bottom, towards the bottom of the plan, which again, if you can see, it says service and loading area. That's 4 stories high. And that is a barrier between anything we are doing licensing wise and the residents, the vast majority of the residents that are here today. So they are over 4 stories. They are then over a natural barrier, over a railway and away from us. The other part of the building, which is ours, which is where the main majority of the red area is, and the hatched red area, that is 10 stories. And all that is going in the 4 stories above the ground floor and the other 10 is residential property, our residents. And our first and equal concern to the residents around us are in relation to ensuring we don't cause nuisance. Good night guarantee. It is a guarantee that if we disturb the night's sleep of our residents in our hotel, we will refund them. So we have no interest in causing issues. So that's very important. We are alive to those issues. In relation to the terrace, the planning permission has, as I understand it, a restriction saying not to be, terraced areas, ground floor, etc., not to be used after 2300 hours. Our only terrace that we're seeking to license, which we would be required to enclose as part of our demise, is that is hatched. Again, nowhere near to those residents, facing away from the residents. Noise, I would submit, can't cause issues. So those are the main points I'd make in relation to points that have been raised. I've offered additional conditions restricting off sales. Off sales is a very small part of our business. It would be really around if I was staying at the hotel and someone came to visit me and we were having a meal, or someone was having a meal and they weren't staying as residents and they wanted to take half their bottle of wine home. There is nothing wrong with that. We would seal it for them and they could take it. Our price point is not around off sales in what you might call the traditional, so we're not in that. The other reason it's included is because for sale of alcohol, we don't seek to license the bedrooms. We don't do room service, we don't have minibars, so we include off sales to residents. If you want to get around that and just say, well, residents are able to serve 24 hours a day, that is one option. So that's in relation to off sales. I think the other points I would make, and I may not have covered all the points, and if you have questions, happy to deal with them, is this goes to the responsible authorities, of course, this application. And the police have looked at this in relation to crime and disorder and all others and have not made a representation. Your environmental health officer has been consulted and has not made a representation. And so what we are seeking is our application for a Premier Inn with a restaurant and a bar service. They are important. All 3 aspects are important to us. And I think what I'll do is, rather than continue on for a long period, I'll pause there. I did make some notes. I'm trying to just look and see if there are other points I haven't addressed. I'll hold there. Yes, I'll just hold there. I think then we can answer questions if you've got specifics. My apologies.
That's great, thank you. I'm sure we will come back with some comments, but that's very helpful. Thank you. So could I ask the committee if you have any questions to ask? Councillor Morton, do you have anything at this point?
Just unmute myself. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wonder if we could have some clarification. There seems to be some confusion over the application to show films as to where you would propose showing the films, just quite what the intention is, if you can give a bit more detail to that.
Yeah, in the detail, I included aspects which I have to say include in every application, and it's really around the occasional film showing that might take place within the bar restaurant area, but I have offered a condition which takes that out of play, so we're not even looking towards that. Mr. Hislop will be able to indicate how often, if ever, that happens, but certainly no intention for the premises to be a cinema. It's not set up like that, and you can look from the physical layout.
Yeah, I couldn't, so that's why I'm asking, because I couldn't see anywhere that seemed to have capacity, and you have said that you didn't intend to operate a cinema. So what this would be, sort of a screen in the bar area or restaurant area, or how would that work?
I'll ask Mr. Hislop to clarify on that one.
Yeah, it's a television in the bar area that we have. Our brand standard is we would normally show rolling news. There are occasions where other items are shown on there. I think it's a standard item that we do apply for. I think going forward, we have another brand, Hub by Premier Inn, which does show films on demand in that's more a tech-led brand in the hotel rooms, but we don't do that here.
Okay, so, no. Thank you. The other concern I had was, as it's been pointed out, the Talgarth Road is the main A4 out of London. It's a very, very busy dual carriageway, because it's quite how you propose to direct people leaving late at night on foot, as to how they would actually leave the premises. You've got the Hammersmith Broadway obviously in one direction, and the nearest underground station would be Barons Court. But if you could just explain what your plans were as to how people would safely leave the venue.
I think I'll ask Mr. Hislop to just go into that in a little bit more detail, but you can see on the plan what you've got is a drop-off pickup point towards the front and towards Talgarth. So if it was taxi-led or whatever, then there is obviously ability to pick up and drop off there, or people getting collected. If there are people that are going on pedestrian access, then the main access, yes, it will be Talgarth Road, which unfortunately, due to COVID, I've not been able to see recently, but it's quite a wide footpath and a thoroughfare for members of the public, and we would see people leaving in a gradual dispersal away from the premises into public transport that's available on that road, and as you say, down to Barons Court, but not significant numbers. But Mr. Hislop perhaps can just clarify on that and how we are well experienced in other premises in similar areas.
I think a good point to make here is actually many of our guests in our food and beverage offer are our guests. So I think a number of applicants have stated late night drinking. That's really not what we're doing. It's a restaurant for ostensibly covering breakfast needs in the morning and a meal in the evening with a bar for our guests. So actually, yes, people are very welcome to come in and have a meal, and we do have guests come and visit us for meals, but most of our guests are internal. They're staying for a meal, they're staying over, they'll have a meal with us and go to bed, and we'll give them a good night's sleep. I think dispersal is would be around the 10:30, 11 o'clock mode, with some leaving a little later.
And I think what we look for is the flexibility in that regard. And again, as an example, if I was staying and I had friends coming to visit me, there's nothing wrong with them coming for a drink, or if we'd been out for the evening, coming back, having a nightcap, as it were, and then they go off home. It's not, we are not looking to be late night drinking bar. And again, I think if you look at the conditions that we've offered with last entry, that kind of thing, it's seen as a gradual dispersal down. And certainly, whilst anything to do with the students, 700 in or not in, I have to say we're not attractive to students. And I think I would again refer to what Premier Inn are and what Premier Inn do across the country. But it's part of what we offer, an important part of what we offer. And we would ensure that our customers dispersed sensibly when they were leaving and going away from the premises. And if we needed to put in place a formal dispersal policy, we'd be more than happy to do that and agree that with the licensing authority and the police if that was felt appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Morton, for now? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. That's clarified.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure who best to pose this to. It could also be a licensing question, but I think if I go to the applicant team first, thanks for highlighting the plans on page 23 and the red area and the hatched area. I just want to clarify. It says internal licensed area, external licensed area. For how many floors does the license apply if granted? You've mentioned the floor, the accommodation floors, but then we also have this idea of taking drinks back, etc., and the films. Where is the license sought to be granted? Is it just on that ground floor area, or is it an entire the entire Premier Inn premises?
It's always a difficult one, and I will explain, and then perhaps anyone else can chip in. I think so far as the sale of alcohol is concerned, we only want consumption on the premises, on the ground floor, as you see it edged red internally or hatched red externally. And just to add, and it's perhaps quite difficult to see because of the hatching, but that is tables and chairs are laid out in that external area. So we're saying we'll have tables and chairs out there. It's not a vertical drinking area. And similarly, with the internal area, you'll see it's set out significantly for tables and chairs, and we're offering that as a condition. The only caveat I would put on that is if, as with every hotel, or I would say nearly every hotel with a license, and as I understand, having read the representations, no issue with a 24-hour license for residents. If residents want to consume alcohol in their rooms, they would be able to take it from the ground floor bar up to their rooms for consumption. So we say, either you note that as part of the license of activity on sales, or it can be done through saying the facility for off sales for residents 24 hours a day. And we've had it from different licensing authorities in different ways. I think on others that we have in your area, it is just expressed as the ability to serve to residents 24 hours a day. Films has come up as a bit of an issue. The intention is really films on demand. I put this in, again, to an extent, future-proofing, because we don't really do films on demand. So I think you then get into a question of where is the delivery of the film. I would say the films are piped into the rooms, but I'm not even sure if that's a licensable activity because it's in a private room to an individual. So it's a bit of a difficult one to say, but it's certainly nothing wider than that, really. And I hope that late night refreshment, which is obviously non-residents, we're just saying inside. So if we were serving food after 11 o'clock to non-residents, that would be covered in late night refreshment. We don't ask for it externally because we're offering the restriction on the external terrace, our external terrace, which mirrors the planning permission condition.
That is immensely helpful. Thank you. Can I just follow on then? What you are wanting is the example you gave. You know, you finished your meal, you've got half a bottle of wine, you just want to be able to take it away, and that could be done by those two methods. Is the intention not there for passers-by, local residents to have off sale, whether or not that's granted? is that not within your business plan? That you, how you know, are you wanting that sort of trade, or is it more to do with making the hotel residents comfortable by allowing, you know, sort of that scenario to happen?
I think our primary would be the ability to serve our residents via off sales or on sales 24 hours a day. Then the second one would be people that come in and have a meal with us and want to take half a bottle home. The third would be anything more than that. It's not an important part, and I'll ask Neil to confirm on this. We asked for it for flexibility. Matter for you if you felt you were going to restrict it. We have some restricted premises licenses elsewhere on that basis. We have a lot that are completely unrestricted. It would be wrong to say, and it's not part of our application, that we're going to compete with the BP Connect or whoever next door with their 24-hour off license. We're not that price point. We just are not, but Mr. Hislop will be able to confirm.
And I'd reiterate that it's a minuscule part of our business. What it's there for is, you might be going out for a meal or going around to somebody's house and you've forgotten to buy a bottle of wine. It really is that small part of our business. It's not, our price points are premium. So concerns around students drinking in our bars, I have been a student as well. So we are a premium bar. We're not a session drinking bar. It would be, that's not our operation and not how we operate our businesses. So no, the off sales is a minuscule part of our business.
Okay, that's immensely helpful. I think I'd like to address the timings. Councillor Murphy suggested some timings, and the residents seems to agree more or less in unison. Well, yeah, I'm trying to phrase this. You know, with the timings that are suggested for you know, the sort of the weekday and the weekend sales be compatible with what you're offering.
I think I'll ask Mr. Hislop to come in on the detail, but I think the question obviously is a valid one, and it's about the promotion of the licensing objectives and the application that we put in, and can we promote the licensing objectives with those hours? And these are undoubtedly difficult times, unprecedented, and I am not going to mention the past year other than to say you have in front of you an operator that has a very, very good track record, produces careers, not just jobs, careers with 100 jobs here, but an element of the success is around not only sales to residents, but sales to non-residents. And I think if you looked in your area, I think those hours that are proposed as 10:30 on a weekday and 11 are too early. And particularly when you look at that over the road, there is a hotel with an unrestricted 2 a.m. license. We're not asking for 2 a.m. unrestricted. We're asking, and I have to say, it's our usual format of licensing application, midnight for non-residents. It gives us that flexibility. And more than that, we have other premises within your area which have those hours without causing an issue. We have many around London with similar hours. And they don't cause, as far as I could see, and I've acted for Whitbread for many, many years, we don't have restrictions as 10:30 for weekday and 11 o'clock at a weekend. We don't say we use it all the time, but it is that flexibility, and it's very much winding down towards those. That's why we ask for them. And I think in my written submission, I refer to the case of Thwaites, which I think will be known to your legal advisor, and the police and crime disorder and your environmental health officer looking at that. So we won't cause a nuisance, we won't cause crime disorder, but those are really, really too early, I think, as terminal hours for us. And I'll just ask Mr. Hislop to confirm and add anything else, really.
I'd confirm that and reiterate we will serve food till those hours, and it's really that winding down and the odd occasion where the evening will develop and stay on till slightly later, but that's occasional, not every evening. So I would concur.
Thanks both. That's very helpful. That might be all from me at the moment. Councillor Stainton, did you want to?
Yes, I was listening to the concern of the residents who are long-term residents about the possible noise element from drinking. And what is the capacity of this balcony? How many people can you get onto that balcony? Because if they were there drinking, that might have a significant impact on the disturbance for the residents.
I will try and add up the numbers of tables and chairs, if you'll bear with me. It's not a balcony, it's on the ground floor, immediately in front of our, there you can see it cross-hatch, and it faces away from the premises. But I will just, if you give me a couple of minutes, I will try and count up, because it's quite a narrow area and it's got a couple of tables, and I've got printed a copy, so I'll try and see if I can just add up. I would have thought about 30 to 40 people. Neil, what do you know offhand, or could you have a look?
Sorry, I haven't counted it, but I suppose I would add in here that actually we man our hotels 24/7, and we have restaurant staff as well. So key to our good night guarantee, we would be managing that area as closely for our own residents as we would for the residents in the local area. So it is in our benefit, and it is part of our business model to make sure that we are not disturbing any guests who are staying in a hotel, and therefore any residents who are close by.
Well, thank you for that, because when we hear that there are going to be about nearly 700 students and maybe 400 in the hotel, it does pose the question of how much the potential for noise is. And I'm glad to hear that the terrace is not going to be able to hold several hundred people.
I think it is very important to stress the reason that is hatched, that is our only area that we would use externally, and we put tables and chairs, and it's a very modest. Students, it's very difficult to comment on the students. They're nothing to do with us, and that's a planning application. I don't know what stage that is. Obviously, we have a number of residents, and we have a restaurant facilities for our customers from breakfast through the day, and we look after our residents, and we stop one resident causing a nuisance to another because of our good night guarantee. So it is in our interest, absolutely, to ensure there's no nuisance, and we are acutely aware of it across all of our estate.
Thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Stainton?
Yes, that's all.
Fantastic. Just another question for the applicant. There was a condition raised by the police for counter-terrorism training, and I don't know if a response came back on that. Can you address that?
We had discussions, and we have counter-terrorism training, but there was no condition pushed for or made in the representation. So we had discussions, and Mr. Hislop be able to confirm, but we have across the board counter-terrorism training for our staff across all our hotels on a periodic basis.
Yes, we do. It's part of our opening process that we train that in.
Okay, that's handy. Mr. Haddon, I see your hand is raised. Unfortunately, only the committee can ask questions at this point, but if there was a comment you wanted to raise, we could hear it and maybe able to form a question from it, but you won't be able to ask anything at this point. Do you wish to raise something?
That would be very kind if I could. It's just an observation of the whole issue and discussion. Mr. Shield says that that Whitbread are not attracted to students. I think our concerns is that 700 students are going to be attracted to them. And while I listen to the glowing reputation of Whitbread and the other premier inns around the country, I think that's absolutely fine. But in this situation here, if the the licensing application could possibly in some way say, we are only going to serve residents and their guests. They've made the point that off sales is a very small and not a significant part of their business at all, in which case it strikes me to say no students. And in the student block, when it goes up with the 700 students, it is known that this bar is off limits to the students. I think that would solve the problem here. Alternatively, given the doubt that Mr. Shield has put upon whether there is going to be student accommodation here, let's defer this licensing application until we know. Thank you.
I'm happy to revert on those points if that would help.
Yeah, that was a question I was beginning to formulate. So I know it's hypothetical and that's always really annoying, but yeah, if you're able to.
Well, I think the application is before you today, and it is our premises, and you're entitled to look around at what is there. But the planning application at the moment isn't for student accommodation, and it shouldn't be deferred for something that may never happen. And if it does happen, it could be months or years away. So I don't think that's entirely at all fair. I think, secondly, when I say where students are not our intended customers or attractive to us or whatever, the reason for that is price point. We are frankly too expensive for students. They don't look to what we are, and I can rely on across the country. We're not student bars. In addition, we will employ an experienced management team to ensure they promote the licensing objectives and don't cause issues. And finally, I think it's somewhat unfair to say you should ban all students. As one resident has already said, they were a student at one time. I was a student. I'm sure there are many students here who went out many times and were perfectly acceptable and behaved in a correct fashion. So apart from the question as to whether you can ban students, and I would say you can't because it would become discriminatory, I think it's painting them all with one brush to say that. We, as reputable operators, would manage that premises as we do all our others to all our customers of whatever sort they are, and we would promote the licensing objectives. And if we didn't, there are, of course, avenues and venues for anyone to come back and question us by way of review. I'm not saying that that would ever happen. We don't have reviews across our premises, certainly not in relation to disorder, certainly not in relation to drunkenness or serving the wrong people at the wrong time. So you have to look at the application as it is before you, hopefully in a positive light, because I feel we put forward a positive. We understand the points that are being made and the concerns and the fear, but this is an application by a very reputable company that operates many, many hundreds of premises without issue.
Thanks. I think that's very helpful. Thanks for that. Diana Rhodes, I hesitate to see your hands up. I should remind residents that you will have a chance to sum up as well at the end. So is this a point that you can add to your fantastic? And Councillor Murphy, similarly, did you want to chip in or are you happy to sum up later? If he's here. No.
Yeah, he is here, sorry. Yes, I've just taken, I have taken my hand down. I'll pick it up in the summation.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we may have finished our questioning. I just want to check. Councillor Morton, is there anything else that you wish to?
No, I'm fine with that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Stainton, did you wish to?
No further questions.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, I'd like to invite parties to sum up, please. From licensing, you have up to 3 minutes. Do you wish to sum up, please?
Nothing further from licensing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Murphy.
Thank you very much. I think I'll start off just first of all by thanking you for listening to us, but also to pick up now on some of the points that have been made and perhaps a couple of points of clarification. On the terrace, there's outside seating there for 30 or 40 people to be served by the Premier Inn. It's a similar request for that was turned down at Sam's and Riverside Studios because of the impact it would have on the local neighbourhood. And the terrace isn't just for those 30 or 40 people seated and served by the applicant. People will naturally come and perch there if there are off sales. Now, the applicant's already said that off sales, and to use their words, are a minuscule part of their business. Minuscule. So if it's a minuscule, there's no need for them to have it. Yeah, there's absolutely no call at all. And the guests that want to take away a bottle of wine and take it home, I would imagine is as rare as a hen's tooth. And I just can't see that having any detrimental effect on Whitbread, and I can see it having a very positive effect on the local residents if off sales are permitted. There have been a couple of comparisons made. One is to Novotel, which has different licensing hours, and that's in a very different location. It's on a major road, and it's not in a residential area, and it hasn't got a large terrace for people to sit outside. So I think that's an unfair comparison. I think it's also an unfair comparison with BP, as BP's off sales are aimed at motorists, and they don't provide food and drink for people to sit around and spend the evening. So I think those are two comparisons that shouldn't have been used. Whilst I understand that Whitbread is doing this in isolation, for the residents, they're not doing this in isolation because this area is being built up by the same developers who have got planning permission for a hotel on an adjacent site and are now looking to change that to student accommodation, and it's expected to come before planning in the next month or so. So for local residents, this is an immediate issue. And I think that the committee has to look at this in the round and not be as focused solely on this one place. I think the point that I think has been made already, that you're not attractive to students because you see yourself as a premier establishment. Sorry, but if there's a bar close by, students will use it. It's the nature of the beast. We've all been there, we've all done it, and it's just not acceptable that it should be open so late. I think the compromise hours are there for the benefit of the residents. You are putting a hotel into a residential area, that's absolutely fine, but it's the noise that's going to come from it and the impact it's going to have on people with that late night opening that's unacceptable. We're asking for you to be good neighbours. And if you're a good neighbour, you become a good friend, so I'm told. So please, if you cut the opening hours down as requested to 10:30 during the week and 11 o'clock, that's fairly standard around the place, to be honest. That's when people go, and people understand if you explain to them when they're having their meal. I don't see that really as having a detrimental impact on your business. And I'll leave with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. If we could hear from the Chair of Save Our Hammersmith, please. And again, if you could keep it to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Very briefly, because we've heard many comments before, it's a unique site next to a residential area and next to a high-speed major road. But all the questions and answers that I've been listening to do indeed suggest that actually there is no conflict between the interests of the residents and the intentions of the applicant. Whether it is the off-licensing issue that Councillor Murphy raised or the opening hours. So I can't really see what the discussion would be about. It would seem to be very simple to restrict the opening hours to what we've suggested, and everybody should be happy, both the operator and the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Ruth Savory, do you wish to sum up? Oh, sorry, Ruth was not speaking, was she? Apologies.
I was, yes, I was.
Oh, you were? I was thinking of someone else, sorry.
But it may be somebody else that you're wanting to.
I've mixed you up with somebody else, yes.
It's Lisa, I was going to say. But the outdoor timing, personally, I think is terribly important for us. Outdoor timing, going inside, anyway.
Okay, noted, thank you. Thierry Tenter, do you wish to add anything? No, fine. I have a long list of names, apologies. And Abel Haddon, do you wish to sum up?
I think, Chair, thank you. I think all the key points have been made. The final thought I would leave on behalf of the residents is, I am sure that Whitbread and Premier Inns has an enviable reputation in all their other locations. They are here coming into a residential area. This isn't a high street. This isn't a commercial area. This is a residential area. And I think as a result of that, the application should be tailored in the way that has been suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana Rhodes, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make 2 comments. Number one, quickly on public safety. I just would like to point out Barron's Court Tube Station, how dangerous that would be with a lot of drunk people late at night wobbling around, which is the closest tube station. So definitely from that point of view, I'd just like to draw attention to that again. And lastly, I also, again, would like to draw attention to the outdoor terrace, very specifically. It may be a few tables and it may be 30 people, but it could be 60 people standing. People do tend to stand around and not just sit at tables. The other thing I really want to point out is what is totally unique is the terrace. There's the Premier Inn terrace, which is very small. The public terrace goes on for quite a big square. Also, please note that the planning permission is being sought right now for a complete change of how that public terrace in the middle of the buildings looks. At the moment, there's an unusual mound-shaped, beautiful looking atrium that was meant to be a very unusual Rogers Stirk atrium with a restaurant inside, which was a big grassy mound. That's coming out. And there will be a planning proposal within a month for the student accommodation, but also to completely change the nature of the terrace. And in community liaison forum meetings, committee meetings with Dominus, they publicly told us that SCAPE, the student accommodation, they were seeking a big terrace with Spanish steps for the students to sit on in the middle. So I personally think it would be a good idea to delay this, because at the moment, the committee doesn't have sight of what kind of public terrace space will be literally adjoining right next to the Premier Inn terrace. That could be a very large terrace. So literally, people could be walking out straight on and carrying on drinking and talking in the public terrace. So that's the point I would make. So I would only say, yes, outdoor terrace. I think 2,200 hours, people should be inside, and then the further licensing rules. And that would be my summary. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for everyone's time and for actually listening to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
So if I could ask the applicant to sum up, please.
Yes, thank you. I will try to keep to my 3 minutes and be as brief as possible. There's a couple of issues have come up. I'm not going to address it again on the position of the student accommodation. It's entirely separate. I think the only issues that impinge upon that are the terrace, which if you license it, we would be required to manage our terrace, which would be barriered off and shown. Question of off sales, we've discussed that. I will leave that to you as to whether you seek to restrict it. You could, if you wish, restrict it to prevent anything for the students, but that's not our area. So that's what I say on that. I really wanted to focus on the law because I think the law is very important in this matter. But firstly, I would say nobody seems to have any criticism of our client. They accept we're a good operator. Nobody's, if I can use a boxing terminology, laid a glove on us and said we've had bad operations, bad issues anywhere. And we are in Hammersmith and Fulham. We are in London extensively. We are in residential areas all around the country. I appreciate in that context, you must consider each application on its merits. And I would ask you to do that, but bearing in mind the good track record we have. We have our good night guarantee, which will show we will be good neighbours. We will not cause a nuisance. We will not cause disorder. And the evidence is not there to show that we would. I understand the anxieties, my clients understand the anxieties, but that's not a good reason to prevent what is a positive application with positive correct hours. There are wider hours nearby for similar premises and ones with an extensive off licence. The councillor indicates that on the one hand, we're on a busy road and that's a bad thing, but on the other hand says Novotel's entirely different because it's on a busy road. Well, it's just over the road from us. Our point is we will not cause a problem. In relation to the law, and I will refer and hold and stand by what is in the written submission because you are guided by the law. Your policy talks about light touch, and your policy talks about imposing what's appropriate for conditions, and we've offered additional conditions. The guidance guides you in how to make applications, and I'll read particularly paragraph 9.12. Each responsible authority be an expert in their respective field. Some cases, particular responsible authority be licensing authority's main source of advice. Police in relation to crime and disorder, environmental health officer in relation to potential public nuisance, fire safety, all the different authorities, not one representation from them. That must stand out. This is a hotel, it's going to be a hotel, and there was no objection to the residential sale of alcohol, it was non-residents and the external areas. Well, the external area is, when you look at that plan that I submitted in the last page, enclosed on one side from the vast majority of residents by 4 stories and then 10 stories. We have our own residents to care for and look after along with those nearby to us. So we would ask you to grant the application as modified with the additional conditions. Consideration, if you wish, in relation to the off sales, but the on sales are extremely important to give flexibility. And I will finish with a case, and that's the Thwaites case, which I mentioned. It makes 2 points. It says you do look to the responsible authorities because they essentially, it doesn't say it quite like this, have no axe to grind. If there was a concern, they would have made a representation. You as members of the committee will know that. And secondly, fear, and this is fear and anxiety, understandable, but fear is not enough, because I finish by saying, as I said before, you're not essentially giving us a license to cause a nuisance or disorder. You're giving us a license to promote the licensing objectives and carry out licensing activities, which we will do. If there were a problem, then there are avenues open to call us back before the committee for a review. My client's absolutely confident. I'm confident that won't be required because that is not the operation we run. We run operations that promote the licensing objectives. Whatever the customers may be trying to come into the premises, we will manage them and we will act responsibly and we will ensure we don't cause a nuisance. And I would just ask you to look at the documents and your policy and the written submission. And I hope you will see this as a positive application that we're putting forward to add to the area, to Hammersmith, and to bring a hotel that has an extremely good track record and something positive to an area which currently is a building that is closed and I don't say derelict, but is there and has been earmarked for redevelopment. So I'd ask you to bear all of that in mind in a positive, and I hope I've covered the points. Thank you.
Thank you, it's very comprehensive. And thanks everyone for your comments and your brevity, it's really appreciated. So we're now going to retire to deliberate and we will make our decision. You're all welcome to remain in the meeting to hear the committee's decision, but this will probably take us some time. And if you don't want to wait, a summary decision will be published on the council's website tomorrow morning. Can I ask members to turn off their video, mute their microphones and join us in the private meeting for deliberations. And we'll see you in a moment.
Thank you.
everyone's back, Chair, you can proceed with the decision.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I can now read out our decision. So, considering the Premier Inn at the West London Magistrates Court, 181 Talgarth Road in London, the committee has considered an application for the grant of a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for the exhibition of films, the provision of late night refreshment indoors, and the sale of alcohol both on and off the premises. In summary, the committee has decided, after taking into account all the individual circumstances of this case and the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, to grant the application in part as follows. For the exhibition of films indoors only, Monday to Sunday, 10 in the morning to midnight midnight. Provision of late night refreshment indoors only, Monday to Sunday, 11 at night to midnight. Sale of alcohol on the premises, Monday to Sunday, 10 in the morning to 11 at night for non-hotel residents, 24 hours for hotel residents. Sale of alcohol off the premises, Monday to Sunday, 10 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening for non-hotel residents, 24 hours for hotel residents. As regards non-standard timings, to extend the proposed hours of all applied activities on New Year's Eve to New Year's Eve terminal hours proposed being midnight on the 2nd of January. For hours open to the public, Monday to Sunday, 6 in the morning to 1 in the morning for non-hotel residents and 24 hours for hotel residents. The license is subject to any mandatory conditions, and we have modified the conditions of the license as volunteered by the applicant in the operating schedule. And we have added conditions to the license as proposed by the police and agreed by the applicant. This license becomes operational of immediate effect. If problems are experienced, then an application for a review of the premises license can be made, and a copy of this committee's full decision, including its reasons and the full text of the conditions added to the license, will be sent to the parties forthwith. And if the applicant's unhappy with the decision, they're entitled to appeal to the Magistrates Court within 21 days from the date of notification of the full decision. Thank you everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting, and a summary of the decision will be published on our website, and the full decision letter will also be sent out. And that brings us to the end. Thank you everyone.